The evening had been calm and ordinary, the kind of evening I had grown to treasure. A soft orange sunset filtered through the curtains, and the smell of cardamom tea still lingered in the air. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one near the window, wrapped in my faded lavender shawl. My favorite drama serial was playing on the television. The theme music filled the room, and for a little while I forgot the heaviness that sometimes visits old hearts. These shows were not just entertainment for me. They were company. The characters felt familiar. Their stories gave rhythm to my quiet days. Ever since my husband passed away, evenings had become long. The television's gentle glow made the house feel less empty. On the screen, the heroine was about to reveal a life-changing secret. I leaned forward slightly, fully invested in the moment. Suddenly, the screen went black. I blinked in confusion. For a second, I thought the electricity had gone out, but the fan was still turning above me. I turned my head. Farhan, my son-in-law, stood near the television, the remote control in his hand. His expression was sharp, almost annoyed. "Enough of this trash," he said firmly. "You watch this nonsense all day." The word trash felt like a slap. It echoed in my ears louder than the television ever had. I looked at him, trying to understand if he was joking. He wasn't. "It's just a serial, Beta," I said gently. I was almost at the important part. He shook his head. "Important? There's nothing important in this. You should spend your time doing something useful. This is a waste of electricity. Useful." The word settled heavily in my chest. I had spent decades being useful. I raised my daughter alone after my husband's death. I stitched clothes for neighbors late into the night to pay for school fees. I saved every rupee carefully. I sacrificed new clothes, new shoes, even small comforts, all so my daughter could build a good future. And now, in my own daughter's home, my simple evening routine was considered wasteful. I noticed Ariba standing quietly near the kitchen entrance. She didn't say anything. She didn't defend me. She simply looked down. That silence hurt more than Farhan's words. "I'm sorry," I whispered softly, though I wasn't sure why I was apologizing. Farhan placed the remote on the table and walked away. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hallway. The room felt colder than before. I sat there staring at the blank screen. Something inside me shifted that night, not anger, not bitterness, just a quiet realization. If they believed I was useless, perhaps it was time to show them how wrong they were. The morning after the television incident, I woke up with a strange calmness in my chest. The hurt was still there, but it had settled into something steadier, something thoughtful. I performed my Fajr prayer and sat on the prayer mat a little longer than usual. Instead of asking Allah to fix my situation, I asked for strength to change it. For years, my mornings had followed the same pattern. I would head straight to the kitchen, prepare breakfast, pack Farhan's lunch, and iron his clothes before he even stepped out of his bedroom. I made sure everything ran smoothly so my daughter's home would stay peaceful. That morning, I did none of it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat quietly near the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the courtyard. The house slowly came to life. Around 8 o'clock, I heard Farhan's impatient voice. "Ariba, where's my lunch? And I can't find my socks." There was confusion in her reply. I thought Amy had prepared everything. Footsteps approached my room. Ariba knocked softly. "Amy, are you feeling unwell?" "I'm perfectly fine, Beta," I said gently. "I just thought today I would spend my time doing something useful." She looked puzzled but didn't argue. Farhan left late for work, slightly irritated. I noticed the crease in his shirt and the way he kept checking his watch. For years, he had never been late. After he left, I dressed simply and stepped outside. Instead of going to the market or staying home to clean, I walked toward the nearby community center I had often passed but never entered. Inside, a group of women were gathered around long tables covered in fabric. They were learning stitching and embroidery as part of a small skill development program. The coordinator welcomed me warmly. When she learned that I had decades of sewing experience, her eyes lit up. "Would you guide the girls?" she asked. I hesitated only for a moment before nodding. By noon, I was teaching them how to keep their stitches straight and their patterns balanced. They listened carefully, asking questions with respect. One young girl said, "Auntie, your hands are so steady. I hope I can learn like you." Her words warmed a place in my heart that had felt cold for a long time. When I returned home, the difference was clear. The kitchen was messy, the laundry was untouched, the electricity bill lay unpaid on the table. Farhan looked at me and asked, "Amy, do you know where the bill receipt is?" "Yes," I replied softly. "But perhaps you should manage it now." There was no anger in my voice, only quiet change, and slowly they were beginning to notice. The days at the community center slowly turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. What had begun as a simple decision to step outside the house became something far greater than I had imagined. Every morning I left after Fajr prayer, carrying a small cloth bag filled with threads, needles, and sample patterns. The young women waited eagerly for me now. They called me Nusrat Auntie with affection and respect. Some were newly married, some were students, and some were mothers trying to support their families. I saw pieces of my younger self in each of them. Under my guidance, their stitches became neater. Their confidence grew stronger. One afternoon, the coordinator approached me with excitement in her eyes. "We've received a bulk order," she said. "A boutique owner wants 20 embroidered shawls. We want you to supervise the designs." Supervise. No one had used that word for me in years. I agreed quietly, but inside, my heart trembled with pride. For days, I worked alongside the girls, selecting colors, correcting patterns, and ensuring every shawl carried perfection. When the payment finally arrived, the coordinator handed me an envelope with my share. My hands shook as I held it. It wasn't just money. It was recognition. When I reached home that evening, Farhan was sitting at the dining table with unpaid bills spread before him. He looked tired. Managing the house without my invisible support had not been easy. "You're back late," he said, though his tone was softer than before. "There was extra work today," I replied calmly. A few days later, the community center organized a small exhibition to display our products. They asked me to attend as the lead supervisor. I invited Ariba and Farhan without expectation. When they arrived, a large banner hung at the entrance. Lead designer, Mrs. Nusrat Ahmed Farhan, stopped walking for a moment. His eyes moved from the banner to me. Inside, women praised our work. Customers asked for my opinion. Young girls introduced me proudly to their families. "This is the auntie who taught us everything," one of them said. I saw something change in Farhan's expression, something close to realization. On the drive home, the silence felt different from before. It was no longer uncomfortable, it was thoughtful. "I didn't know you were doing all this," Farhan finally said. "You never asked." I answered gently. That night, he placed the television remote beside me. "I'm sorry about that day," he said quietly. I was wrong. I looked at him for a long moment. My heart felt lighter, but not because he apologized. It felt lighter because I no longer needed his approval to feel worthy. My revenge had not been loud. It had been steady, and it was working. 6 months had passed since I first decided to step away from the house routine. In that time, the world outside my home had become my canvas. The shawl project we had started at the community center had grown beyond anyone's expectation. Orders came from nearby towns and even distant cities. Women from our neighborhood proudly wore the embroidered pieces we created, and the boutique owner now offered to sell them at double the price. For the first time in years, I had money in my own hands. Not charity, not a loan, money I had earned with my own skills, but more than that, I had respect, a recognition I hadn't felt in decades. It was quiet, steady, and deeply satisfying. One evening, I invited Ariba and Farhan to the center's exhibition. Ariba looked nervous, while Farhan's face reflected curiosity mixed with uncertainty. When we arrived, a banner greeted us, lead designer, Mrs. Nusrat Ahmed. Farhan's eyes widened. He stepped back slightly, as if seeing me in a new light. The women surrounded me, introducing themselves, praising the work, and asking for my guidance. Young girls took photos with me, beaming with admiration. I noticed Farhan standing quietly in the corner, a slight flush on his cheeks. I could sense the surprise, perhaps even regret. He had never imagined that the quiet, elderly woman he had dismissed as useless could become the center of such admiration. On the drive home, the air between us was thick but different, not tense, but thoughtful. Farhan finally spoke, his voice low. I didn't realize how much work you did, how capable you are. I smiled gently, choosing my words with care. You never asked, Beta, but it's never too late to notice. Back home, he placed a small package on the table. I opened it to find a brand, new smart television, for you, he said softly, so you can watch your shows without interruption. I looked at Ariba, whose eyes glistened with unshed tears. She whispered, Amy, I'm sorry I stayed silent that day. I touched her cheek and said, sometimes silence teaches louder than words, and sometimes patience is more powerful than anger. That night, I sat in my room, wrapped in my soft shawl, watching my favorite drama. The television glowed warmly, casting light on the calm satisfaction in my heart. This time, it wasn't about the show. It was about dignity, about standing tall despite disrespect, about proving, without shouting or fighting, that my worth could not be diminished. Farhan helped with the shawl business now, building a small website and managing orders online. He spoke proudly of me to his friends. The revenge I had taken was not cruel. It did not humiliate. It did not destroy. It had built me, and that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all, to transform hurt into strength, disrespect into recognition, and silence into success. Because sometimes the best way to answer insult is not with words, but with the quiet, unwavering demonstration of your own worth.